There's a battle going on right now in the sports card hobby. That's right, between collectors and flippers. Can they coexist? That's what we're going to explore this week on EDI Sports Show. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Doc Schwartz, and this week we're going to take a much closer look at the tension between collectors and flippers in the hobby. That's right, there is a war raging between these two camps, and it doesn't look like either side is giving up anytime soon. So what does that mean for you? Do you consider yourself a collector, or do you see yourself as a flipper? Is it possible for both sides to get along and coexist, or does one side need to defeat the other once and for all? That's the question that we're asking this week. Which one are you? Are you a collector or are you a flipper? Which camp do you belong to? Before we dive right in, let me just make sure that everybody is following me over on Instagram. If you haven't already, this is my Instagram. Go over to IG, EDI Sportscards. Go hit the follow button and also go check out the Teach Me Sales Skills. That's the orange and black post right there, right here with the arrow. Just hit the follow button on that post. Hit the like, comment 5 pillars, and I will send you the free PDF, which will help you sell your cards when the time is right. But here's now what we're going to get into, which is the first segment, which is flippers and collectors. And so which camp do you belong to? A collector is a person who buys cards for the sole purpose of holding on to them for personal enjoyment. Are you a collector? Did you buy the cards just because you like the cards? Do you want to hold on to them just because you want to have a collection? I'm at the collecting stage of my journey, and so I decided to pull out some cards just to kind of show you kind of like the whole point of what a collection really means. These cards aren't about value. I don't care how much they cost or how much they're worth. I'm not looking to sell them. And that's the thing, is that collectors buy cards because they like the cards. They want to have a collection. That's the whole point. So here's just a few of those cards. Again, not in any order and nothing of real value. We'll get into some of the 75s. Here we go. And then we can end it up with some 76s. Now, the whole point is that that's what a collection is. You buy the cards because you like the cards. You want to have a collection. And that's what a collector is. So here's the problem. Flippers don't like that perspective. In fact, flippers want to know, why aren't you selling your cards? So what's a flipper? A flipper is a person who buys cards for the sole purpose of selling them. I used to be a flipper back in the day. That's right. From the ages of 13 to 18, I was a sports card dealer, and I bought a ton of cards with no intention of ever holding on to them. I used to just buy cards to flip them, basically. And so what I want to do is I want to show you some of those cards that I actually bought for the intention of making money. So here's a whole bunch of Tom Glavine rookies. Here's some 87 Maguires. Here's Ken Griffey Jr. for Donruss. Here's the other Donruss rated rookies. So that's the rookie one. Here's Frank Thomas rookie. We've got Gary Sheffield rookie. We've got a bunch of Greg Jeffries, which you guys know about already. All right, that's the Fleer and the Donruss. We've also got the Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden rookies. Again, these are all filled because I was a flipper back in the day. And I never thought that I would hold on to them, but the problem was that the hobby crashed. And once that happened, nobody wanted to buy cards. And so that's how I turned into a hoarder, where I have all of these cards that nobody wants to buy. And that's the issue. So here's the question. When is the right time to buy? Which players should you buy? And when's the right time to sell? Here's the problem, is that no one can time the market, and that's where flippers are getting themselves into trouble. And that's also why collectors don't like flippers, because unfortunately flippers seem to be driving the prices up on certain cards, but then are nowhere to be found on other cards. If you would have told me in 2010 that the sports card hobby was going to have a major boom, I would have called you nuts. The hobby wasn't dead, but it wasn't going crazy either. And if you were a collector, there were plenty of deals to find. But then the pandemic happened, and all of a sudden, everything went up. Yes, that's right. The entire sports card hobby spiked, and then every single card was going up no matter which one you picked. And this created tension between collectors and flippers. For collectors, every card that they wanted to buy now just went up by 3, 4, and 5x. So what were they supposed to do? For example, this 1986 Michael Jordan Fleer PSA 10 card was worth around $40,000 in 2015, 2016. But once the pandemic happened, this card went through the roof, and now it sells for around $200,000 each, which means that's a 5x multiple on this card. So now what? If you're a collector, of course, you're happy about this if you own that card because you just made a ton of money on the card, except for the fact that you're never going to sell it. And that's sort of this inherent issue, the tension between collectors and flippers. Flippers want to buy that card, again, but only if they can buy it for $150,000. And this becomes the question. If you're a collector, do you want to take $150,000 for a card that's worth $200,000, or are you just going to hold on to it forever? And flippers want to make money, and they can't make money if they pay top dollar. And this is the tension. Collectors say it's the flippers that are driving the market into pandemonium. They are the ones that drive the prices up, and they're the ones that have caused this massive bubble. But are they right? Or could demand just be that high for sports cards? That's the collector's argument, and that's the one that I want you to think about right now. Are collectors correct, or maybe the flippers are right? On the other hand, flippers say that they are good for the hobby. In fact, without them, there would be no market. That's right, there would be nobody actually buying the cards. And so that's really the question that you need to answer. So now, in reality, and here's an example, when I go to sports card shows, what I see is a handful of flippers that go to every single card show, and they are spending tens of thousands of dollars buying up all your cards. And if those flippers went away, what would happen to the sports card market? And so this is why flippers think that they're more important than collectors, because who's actually buying the cards? Let's not forget the impact of social media on the sports card market. Before 2017, there weren't many people talking about sports cards. But in 2025, there's an entire cottage industry dedicated to sports cards on YouTube and on social media. Because of social media influencers, there's Whatnot, Fanatics Live, Veriswap, Arena Club, just to name a few, and social media apps where you can buy, sell, and trade your cards. And are these apps just for flippers, or can collectors take advantage of the added eyeballs and accessibility of cards? Is there any middle ground? Can collectors and flippers coexist, or does one side need to defeat the other? And that's the question for this week. What do you think? I understand both sides because I have lived both sides. On the one hand, the flippers provide liquidity to the market. Not only that, but they are actively seeking your cards. On the other hand, we all know the truth. Flippers don't want your junk wax cards. They don't want your pop 20,000 PSA 10 card, and they definitely don't want your base cards. But can the hobby survive without them? If collectors buy and hold their cards, how can new collectors actually get into the hobby? Where will they find the cards that they want to buy and collect? And does that mean flipping is here to stay no matter how loudly collectors scream and complain about it? You be the judge. Post your thoughts in the comments. And while we're at it, let's check out your comments from last week's show. Okay, my favorite part of the show, we've got a whole bunch of comments here. So let's get to the first one. This is from Adrian Angelo, and he says, PSA controls the hobby. That was on the episode of The Secret Society, and you might be right. PSA may control a large portion of the hobby. They do about 1 million cards every single month. Just so everybody's aware, they are a massive player in the sports card hobby. All right, let's get to the second comment. This one's from GZ Keen, and he says, yeah, eBay's tracking is a joke. Massive fraud on sub $20 cards. eBay hates sellers. It's insanity. I want to thank GZ for that comment. I really do. I think that eBay, I don't think that they actively hate sellers, but I think that they don't care about the sports card hobby because they sell everything. And I think that sports cards is such a nuanced market that they just don't know how to deal with it. And so they just say, we don't care. They try, I guess, their best, but honestly, I don't think they really know what to do with sports cards. So that's why I've said, I think we need a new platform. We need someone out there to create a platform where we can buy and sell cards without having to deal with the eBay infrastructure. I think fees are way too high. I think the most that you should be able to charge on cards is 10%. Again, that would be a consignor deal. So if you're putting your cards up, now also, if you're selling your own cards, why are you paying 10% fees? It just doesn't make any sense. So again, I think we have to figure out the fee structure here. We also need to get a way to get out of the scam aspect, the fraud aspect. There needs to be more protocols and more safeguards. I'm not sure how you do all of that, but again, these are some of the concerns. All right, let's get to the next comment. This one is from Jake, Y9Q. Show your hockey collection. All right, Jake. Well, I didn't have it with me right now because I just read your comment. But what I'll do is I'll start to put together some of the cards that I have. Again, I don't know if you really want to see the whole collection or if you guys have a suggestion. What do you think is the best way to show off your collection, either on social media, on YouTube? What are your suggestions? Put them in the comments because I'll make a video with my collection, but I just don't know the most interesting way to do it. Again, I want it to be entertaining, not just, oh, here you go, here's one card, here's two cards, here's, like, to me, that's a little boring. But if you guys have a better suggestion, let me know, put it in the comments, and we'll get to it. All right, here we go. We've got the last one is from USC Fan 03, and he says, why are you mentioning Gary Vee? He hasn't spoken about the hobby in years. He's been silent for a long time. Well, USC fan, first of all, you are half correct. Gary Vee did speak about sports cards about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. He did get silent and he admitted why. And so if you haven't been following Gary Vee, this is the reason why he went silent on sports cards, is because he was afraid of the pump and dump. Every time he would talk about a particular section of the sports card hobby, that part of the hobby would boom. And so he was like, I'm creating demand where there really might not be demand. And he said, I'm a collector and I'm also a dealer. And I can't figure out if there's real demand here or did I create the demand? And that's a problem, especially for somebody like Gary Vee. If you're trying to sell cards and all of a sudden there's demand over here because you decided to talk about one particular player, but there's not real demand, it's artificial demand, that's a real problem for the hobby. And that's actually sort of the issue that Gary Vee is now facing with sports cards, is because if he talks about them, there is a pop, there is a bump. Now, what I want a USC fan to know is the reason I talked about Gary Vee in that video was because he was the one that started the boom, the pandemic boom. So he was talking about sports cards in 2017 and 2018. That's before Card Collector 2 was on YouTube. That's before Mojo Sports was on YouTube. That's before the Sports Card Collector, the Sports Card Investor ever made a video about sports cards. So what I need everybody to understand, or I want you to know, is that Gary Vee is kind of the one that kicked off all of this hype. And that's one of the reasons why Michael Rubin and Fanatics jumped into the sports card hobby. They were never going to buy Topps if Gary Vee hadn't been talking about sports cards. And so that's what people really just need to understand and recognize about the entire hobby, is that it started with Gary Vee talking about it to his 10 million subscribers. If he didn't do that in 2017 and 2018, basically saying there's a real opportunity to make money selling sports cards. That's what he was saying. He was saying there's a real opportunity to make money. That's why all the flippers came in. That's why every single card you bought went up, because of Gary Vee's talking points on the sports card hobby. That's the only reason I brought him up. You're correct that today he doesn't talk about it as much, but he is at the National every single year setting up as a dealer, and he does have content when he's there. So just be aware that he's been doing content on sports cards every single year, even though he doesn't talk about it as much. All right, that's our show for this week. I hope that you enjoyed it. I'm trying to make these videos a little bit more entertaining. Hopefully you liked it. If you did, hit the like button and let me know. Hit the subscribe button as well. This is Doc saying I'll see you next week.